cuff him. General Marcus Thorne's command cracked like ice over Arlington Cemetery. Under a lead gray sky, military police snapped steel onto the wrists of Staff Sergeant Leo Vance, a tomb guard frozen mid-duty like a marble statue. The crowd gasped, their phones capturing the unprecedented disgrace at this sacred site. A 4-star general versus a lone sentinel. But they couldn't know the general was just seconds away from realizing he was arresting the man who had saved his life not once, but twice. Before I tell you what that secret was that turned everything around, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The scene was set on a late autumn afternoon, a bitter wind whipping leaves across bone-white headstones. The air at Arlington, usually thick with a solemn reverence, had curdled into something tense and volatile. The cold wasn't just in the wind that bit at exposed skin. It was in the collective, sharp intake of breath from the 50 or so onlookers who had gathered to witness the hallowed changing of the guard. Now, they were witnessing its desecration. Their phones, initially raised to capture a moment of perfect discipline, were now documenting a scene of public humiliation. Whispers spread through the crowd like a contagion. Shocked, angry, confused. At the center of it all stood Staff Sergeant Leo Vance. At 30, his face was already etched with the kind of severity that comes from staring into the middle distance for too long, a habit learned in places far from this manicured lawn. His jaw was a hard line, and his gray eyes, steady and steely, remained fixed on the horizon. He didn't flinch as the cold metal of the handcuffs bit into his wrists over his pristine white gloves. He didn't blink. His posture remained immaculate, his spine a rod of iron. To the MPs flanking him, he was a prisoner. To the crowd, a spectacle. But inside his own mind, Leo Vance was simply calculating. He wasn't feeling the shame they expected. He was feeling the familiar, cold clarity of a man assessing a tactical situation. He was counting heartbeats, measuring the cadence of the general's furious breathing, and waiting for the precise moment to deploy his only weapon, the truth. The source of that fury, General Marcus Thorne, strode onto the plaza as if he owned the very marble beneath his polished boots. A living monument to military authority, Thorne was a man carved from granite and ambition. His chest was a billboard of valor, a dazzling array of ribbons and medals that told the story of a 30-year ascent to the highest echelons of power. His face was a mask of cold indignation, his eyes locked on Vance with the kind of disdain a king might reserve for a traitor. He was here for a high-profile wreath-laying ceremony, an event demanding flawless execution, and this sentinel, this sergeant, had apparently spat in the face of tradition. "You have disgraced this uniform." Thorne's voice was low, yet it carried across the plaza, each word a hammer blow. "You have dishonored this sacred ground with your insubordination." Behind Thorne, his adjutant, a young major, looked profoundly uncomfortable, shifting his weight and casting a nervous glance at the crowd. He leaned in, whispering, "Sir, perhaps this would be better handled in private." The optics are of a soldier facing the consequences of his actions. "Major," Thorne snapped back, not bothering to lower his voice. "Let them see that no one is above the chain of command." The crowd, however, was beginning to find its own voice. Among them stood a group of West Point cadets, their crisp gray uniforms a stark contrast to the unfolding chaos. They watched with wide, disbelieving eyes, their textbook understanding of military honor colliding with this raw, public spectacle. Their instructor, a seasoned captain, tried to quiet their murmuring, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. Near the rope line, a man in his late 60s stood straighter than the cadets. His worn jacket bore the faded patches of the 1st Cavalry Division and a Purple Heart. A veteran of the Gulf War, he stared at the scene, his jaw working silently. Finally, he spoke, his voice raspy with emotion but clear enough for all to hear. "That's not right," he called out. "You don't put a tomb sentinel in cuffs on his post. Not for anything." Thorne ignored him. His focus was entirely on Vance. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Sergeant?" he demanded, contempt dripping from the title. Vance's gaze finally shifted from the horizon to meet the general's. His voice, when it came, was unervingly calm, devoid of fear or anger. "Yes, General," he said, the words cutting through the tense silence. "One truth. Before you take me away, to understand the general's rage, you have to rewind 72 hours. The scene was the same plaza, but the atmosphere was entirely different. A brilliant autumn sun warmed the marble, and the air was alive with the quiet dignity of a major memorial ceremony. A delegation of foreign dignitaries, Pentagon top brass, and Gold Star families had gathered. The security was a finely tuned machine. Every person screened, every angle watched. The event was running on a Swiss watch schedule, a testament to military precision, with General Thorne himself slated to deliver the keynote address. Staff Sergeant Leo Vance was on duty, his first hour of a grueling 24-hour shift. To the 100 or so attendees, he was part of the scenery, a stoic figure of ceremonial importance. But Vance was never just ceremonial. His mind, honed in the crucible of Afghanistan, was a threat assessment engine that never shut down. While his body performed the ritual's 21 precise steps, his eyes were constantly scanning, analyzing, and questioning. And they snagged on one man. He stood near the edge of the crowd, a man in his 40s in a heavy, ill-fitting windbreaker, incongruous with a mild, sunny day. His collar was pulled high, and his eyes darted around, never settling, avoiding the direct gaze of the uniformed officers. He kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other, a nervous, kinetic energy that screamed discomfort. His hands repeatedly clenched and unclenched the straps of his bulky backpack, his knuckles white. To a tourist, he was nobody. To a security guard, perhaps a person of mild interest. To Leo Vance, he was a flashing red light on a control panel, a dissonant note in a symphony of order. Every instinct, forged in the dust and blood of combat zones, screamed that this man did not belong. Vance keyed his discreet radio. "Watchtower, this is Sentinel 1. I have eyes on a person of interest, southeast quadrant. Male, 40s, black windbreaker, gray backpack. Recommend immediate secondary screening." The voice that came back belonged to Major Rawlings, a man known for his rigid adherence to protocol and his utter lack of imagination. "Negative, Sentinel 1. All attendees have been cleared. We are on a tight schedule. The dignitaries are in place. Do not, I repeat, do not create a scene." Vance's jaw tightened. "Sir, with respect, his behavior is a textbook match for a hostile actor under stress. I have a bad feeling. I need a team to intercept." "Your feelings are not part of the protocol, Sergeant." Rawlings' voice was sharp, impatient. "You are 30 minutes from your relief. Stand down and maintain your post. That is a direct order." But Vance had seen this before. He'd seen that same coiled tension in a man's shoulders moments before an IED detonated. He knew the cost of ignoring a gut feeling. He was due to be relieved by the next guard in the ceremony that would precede General Thorne's speech. Protocol demanded he complete his walk and yield the post. To refuse was unthinkable. It was gross insubordination. But as the relief sentinel began his approach, Vance made a split-second decision. As he executed a turn, he performed a misstep, an infinitesimally small stumble that was nonetheless a shocking breach of form. It was just enough to disrupt the perfect timing of the changeover, just enough to shift his position, placing himself subtly between the suspect and the main dais where the dignitaries and General Thorne were seated. As he did, he made deliberate eye contact with a two-man security team on the far side of the plaza, giving a barely perceptible flick of his head in the suspect direction, a non-protocol, field expedient signal. The delay it caused was a ripple that became a wave. The ceremony ground to a halt. The security team, trusting the instinct of a tuned sentinel over the schedule, moved in. The suspect, seeing them approach, bolted. The ceremony was delayed by a chaotic 45 minutes. The dignitaries were perturbed. The media was buzzing. And General Thorne, whose keynote address was thrown into disarray, was incandescent with fury. A report landed on his desk an hour later. It didn't mention the suspect who was apprehended off-site. It only mentioned one thing: Staff Sergeant Leo Vance's unprecedented public insubordination. Back in the present, the plaza was a pressure cooker. Let him speak. The Gulf War veteran's voice boomed again, and this time, others joined in. Let him speak. The West Point cadets looked towards their captain, who gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The chant grew louder, a chorus of defiance against the four-star general. The raw power of public opinion, amplified by a dozen live-streaming phones, was a force that even Marcus Thorne could not ignore. He felt the weight of those cameras, the judgment in those eyes. His jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing. He raised a gloved hand, and silence fell once more. 1 minute, Sergeant, Thorne bit out, his voice like grinding stones. Make it count. Leo Vance took a slow, measured breath. The cuffs glinted. When he spoke, his voice was steady, carrying to every corner of the plaza, a lesson in controlled power. This isn't about defiance, General. It's about a pattern. It's about what I saw 3 days ago and what I saw 10 years ago in Afghanistan. Thorne's eyes narrowed. The word Afghanistan hung in the air, charged with unspoken history. The crowd leaned in, forgetting to breathe. Korangal Valley, 2015, Vance began, and the world of Arlington dissolved. Suddenly, the air was not crisp and cold, but thick with heat and the smell of dust and diesel fumes. The sun was a merciless hammer in a bleached white sky. A younger Sergeant Vance was on overwatch, his scope scanning the treacherous ridges of a valley nicknamed the Valley of Death. Below, a small convoy of armored vehicles was navigating a narrow pass. Inside one of them was a visiting Colonel, Marcus Thorne, en route to a high-stakes, clandestine meeting with local tribal elders, a meeting that could shift the intelligence balance in the entire sector. My job was to secure the route. Vance's voice narrated the memory. High-level recon. I spotted a figure on a ridge, dressed as a local shepherd. But things were wrong. The details were wrong. In a place where everything is caked in dust, his fingernails were clean. His shoes were new, not the worn sandals a shepherd would wear. He was pretending to tend to a goat, but he held his staff wrong, too tense. He was watching the convoy with an intensity that had nothing to do with curiosity. Vance's voice remained even, but the crowd could feel the tension of the memory. I radioed my CO, a young lieutenant eager to impress. I told him to halt the convoy, that we had a potential spotter for an ambush, or worse, a suicide bomber. The scene in Vance's memory sharpened. He was arguing into his radio. The lieutenant's voice, tinny and panicked, crackled back. Negative, Sergeant. We can't be late. Colonel Thorne's meeting is critical. Do not stop this convoy. Proceed. He gave me a direct order, Vance told the crowd at Arlington, his eyes locked on Thorne. Just like Major Rawlings did 3 days ago, in order to prioritize a schedule over an instinct. But I had seen that look before. The look of a man who didn't plan on going home. So I made the call. I disobeyed. The memory reached its climax. Vance could be seen firing a single, precise shot into the dirt road just in front of the lead vehicle. An unforgivable breach of protocol, but an undeniable signal to stop. The convoy screeched to a halt. A team was dispatched. The shepherd tried to run, but was quickly subdued. Under his robes, Vance's voice dropped, becoming heavy. He was wearing a vest. It was packed with C4 and ball bearings, enough to obliterate the lead vehicle and everyone in it. Your vehicle, sir. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Thorne's face, that granite mask of fury, had changed. A crack had appeared. He remembered the suffocating heat, the sudden stop, and the image of the EOD tech holding up the crudely made vest that was meant to end his life. That incident was classified, Vance concluded, pulling everyone back to the cold Arlington marble. I was told to forget it, and I did, until 3 days ago, when I saw another man, with the same look in his eyes, in a place even more sacred, standing 30 feet from you. Twice, General. The choice was the same. Follow the order, or follow my training. Twice, the life at stake was yours. The silence that followed Vance's revelation was absolute. It was heavier than the marble of the tomb, deeper than the graves that surrounded them. Every phone was still, every eye fixed on General Thorne, whose face was a battlefield of warring emotions. The fury was gone. replaced by a wave of dawning horror, then shock, and then a profound, stomach-churning realization. Before he could process it, his adjutant, the young major, surged forward, his face pale. He wasn't whispering now. He held a tablet, thrusting it towards the general. "Sir, we have an emergency intel update. For the arrest 3 days ago. You need to see this." On the screen was a preliminary report. The suspect, apprehended after fleeing the ceremony, had been identified. He was linked to a known overseas extremist cell that had publicly threatened American military leadership. The analysts examining his backpack had found the components of a sophisticated, remotely detonated explosive device. It was packed with steel ball bearings to maximize casualties. The report concluded with a chilling assessment. The device had enough power to defeat a light armored vehicle and was likely intended to be triggered during the general's speech, targeting the main dais. Targeting him. Thorne stared at the screen, then his eyes lifted to meet Vance's. The last vestiges of his anger crumbled into dust. He saw not an insubordinate sergeant, but a guardian. A soldier who had twice stood between him and a violent death, and whose only reward for the first act of salvation was silence, and for the second, public disgrace and a pair of handcuffs. The weight of his misjudgment crashed down on him, and it was heavier than all the medals on his chest. Slowly, deliberately, he began to walk towards Vance. Each step was heavy, an admission of his own blindness. He stopped directly in front of the man he had ordered arrested. The crowd held its breath. Thorne began, his voice thick with an emotion no one there had ever heard from him before. "I was wrong. I was unforgivably wrong." He turned to the MPs. "Get those cuffs off him. Now." But as one of the MPs fumbled for his key, Thorne held up a hand. "No, give me the key." The MP, confused, complied. General Marcus Thorne, a 4-star general in the United States Army, took the small key and with his own hands unlocked the handcuffs from Staff Sergeant Vance's wrists. The metallic click echoed across the plaza, a sound of profound reversal. Vance simply flexed his wrists, the red marks on his skin a testament to his ordeal, before seamlessly reassuming his position of duty. Thorne turned to face the crowd, his voice now imbued with a humility that made it more powerful than any command. "This man," he said, gesturing to Vance, "did not disgrace his uniform. He honored it in a way most of us will never be asked to. He reminded me of a lesson I had clearly forgotten, that rules are meant to serve honor, not the other way around." He then turned to his stunned staff. "I want a full review of security protocols. Effective immediately, I am authorizing a Sentinel direct threat line. Any Tomb Sentinel with combat experience who identifies a potential A-level threat will have direct, unfiltered access to the Arlington Command Center. Their report will be treated with the same urgency as a direct order from me. No soldier will ever again face punishment for protecting this hallowed ground." A ripple of applause started, soft at first, then growing stronger. The Gulf War veteran was beaming, clapping his hands with vigor. Thorne gave Vance one last look, one filled with a debt he could never repay. Then he and his entourage departed, leaving a transformed atmosphere in their wake. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, talking in hushed, awestruck tones, Leo Vance resumed his post. 21 steps. Turn. Pause. The rhythm of his duty unbroken. Later that evening, as dusk settled and the crowds were long gone, the old veteran returned. He stood alone at the rope line and, facing the solitary marching figure of Sergeant Vance, he raised his hand in a slow, perfect salute. As Vance executed his turn at the end of the mat, his back to the empty plaza, he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. A silent acknowledgement. A quiet understanding between guardians, passed down through generations. What we witnessed at Arlington that day was more than just an arrest and a reversal. It was a powerful reminder that true honor isn't found in rigidly following a rule book. It's forged in the heart of a soldier willing to bear any consequence to uphold their sacred duty. It teaches us that some truths are so vital. They demand that the rules be broken to protect them. Have you ever encountered someone like Sergeant Vance, who stood against authority because they knew they were right. What would you have done in that situation, as a bystander, or even as the general? And in a world that depends on order and discipline, how much room should we leave for human instinct, for the gut feelings of those we entrust to protect us? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this story about courage and conviction moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories about the quiet heroes who stand guard in plain sight. Share this video with someone who believes that honor is more than just a word. We read every single comment, and we value your perspective on these incredible moments. More stories about military honor and extraordinary sacrifice are waiting for you on your screen. Click to watch one next, and we'll see you tomorrow with an incredible story about a firefighter who had to make an impossible choice in the heart of a blazing inferno.